As the days grow shorter and nature transitions from a soft, gentle autumn into the harshest of winters, the garden, it can still be a place that can be an incredibly joyful place to be. It can be a place to connect, reflect, and recharge, and really join together with your family. I'm Elizabeth. I'm a garden coach, and for me, the garden, it's not just a place, it's an incredible sanctuary to connect, to be together with your family. It's a space really filled with magic and a lovely place to get off your screens and really be together with those that matter to you and really connect with the things that are the most important to you. Alan Titchmarsh said that a garden is an escape to reality, and I think about that all of the time when I get really stressed. If you're looking to create a magical November garden, or you just want inspiration to turn your garden into a family sanctuary, stick around. I've got lots to show you. November. Why be in the garden this month? Oh, our little robin friend is here. How lovely is that? That is a good reason to be in the garden in November, isn't it? So today, the topic of our video, why November is so special to me, and why I love being in the garden in November. And the crazy thing is, just as I started, just as I sat down and grabbed my cup of tea, our robin, we have this lovely little robin called Bobby Robin. He's just joined us. He's just over there, sitting in the now leafless Amelanchier tree. He is the cutest little robin. And it's lovely to see him because I think it's such a reminder that there are so many things that are really, really lovely about being in the garden in November. One of them is that it's a chance just to sit and have a cup of tea. Now, of course, you could sit and have a cup of tea in the garden at any time of the year, but so many of my friends, so many of my gardening friends that I speak to, they say, oh, the garden, it's too busy. I never get to just sit and have a cup of tea. And that's because for so much of the year, there's planting and weeding and watering, and there's so much to do. But November is a lovely time to just slow down and just enjoy the garden. And yes, it's not as beautiful as it was, but there's still so many lovely things to experience in the garden, like having a little robin just come and visit you in the garden. Now, one of the other things is, for me, November, one of the lovely things about November is the change that it brings. In my Edinburgh garden, at the start of November, it was actually really sunny, and I had roses still flowering, I had dahlias that were still blooming, whereas then we had really sharp frost. We had a week of -5, -6, which is quite unusual in my city centre garden. The pond froze over, the kids had great fun picking out the frozen ice and trying to smash it off the ground, or throwing rocks at the pond. They love doing that, trying to crack the ice. And I just have to smile. The little robin is still floating around the garden. He's so sweet. Anyway, and then the morning after my daughter's sleepover birthday party, we had really heavy snow, and it just lasted for a few hours, but it was so beautiful. And the girls, when they woke up from their sleepover, actually had a chance to build a snowman in the garden. So the thing that I adore about November is the change in seasons that it brings for us, and the chance to really transition from what can still be a really sunny and warm, very gentle, soft autumn into the kind of harsh reality of a proper autumn, or the start of winter. And even though it's coming and we know that Christmas is going to be here soon, I think November is just a lovely time just to slow down and enjoy our space before things get so hectic. And before things get so hectic, or as a way to really prevent them from getting quite so hectic, one of the things that I always focus on in November is gratitude. Now, obviously, in America, they have Thanksgiving, which is a whole feast to celebrate things that you're grateful for. But here in this country, we don't have that here in the UK. But I still really focus on gratitude for November, largely because autumn for me is a little bit bittersweet. I love the season. I think it's very, very beautiful, but it always reminds me of the hardest time of my life, when my lovely little girl a few years ago was really suddenly really unwell. Now, we were really lucky, but she had incredible surgeons and they saved her. But I will never forget that. And I will never forget how lucky I am that they did save her, and that I have my healthy, wonderful, incredible girl with me every day. I will never forget how lucky I am that I have two healthy children. And when when it became clear that she was going to be well, I realized that what I need to be happy is for my children to be healthy. And so long as my children are healthy, I have everything I need to be happy. So November is always the month that I really reflect on that. And I spend a lot of my mornings journaling. And while I'm journaling, I spend a lot of time thinking about all of the things that I have that I am so, so grateful for. And I also find it's a really great preparation to get into Christmas. You know, December is nearly here, the month of madness and Christmas and festivities. And don't get me wrong, I love Christmas, but it's really easy to get carried away. And I always find that by thinking about all of my blessings, it in the month before, it helps me to connect with what's important and not get caught up in all the madness of Christmas, and instead focus on the joy and the love and the connection to the people that really matter to me at that season. Here it is, my pergola. It is finally finished. In the last video, in the June video, this was very much a work in progress. I think we just had put in this one pillar, and you can see now it's finished. And I can't wait to show you the inside of it. I've just turned it around for you. You can see I've got my cozy blanket there. It is my favorite place to sit in the morning with my cup of tea and my journal and just start the day there. It is so calm and so lovely. When in the June video, this corner was still just a pile of rubble. But you can see we've put in quite a large dining sofa here. The reason we've done that is we want it to be a multifunctional space. It's a great place to hang out. It's a great place for the kids to cuddle up, but it's also a place where we can squeeze in lots of friends to have dinner here, or even just have lots of friends over for a cup of tea. So we've made it quite big. You can also see I've strung up lots of lights. I've got fairy lights, I've got a pendant light, and I've got festoon lights. I really wanted it to make it not just a place that we use in summer, but a place that's still lovely in winter. So I've added a lot of ivy. When we were in Manchester recently, there was lots of ivy everywhere with little fairy lights kind of wound around, with the ivy winding around the fairy lights, and I just thought that was so beautiful. So I've been adding a lot more evergreens into this part of the garden, but also the rest of the garden to make sure that it's still a really lovely space to be in, even though it is getting colder. I'm a huge fan, there I am, of using the garden still in winter. This is our little prep area. The plan is to maybe eventually put in a full kitchen or kind of a more dedicated space, but this is what we have for now. I've hung some bird feeders here. We've got little robins and things like that coming back now to come and use them. And this pergola is just an absolutely spectacular space. It is 3.5 by nearly 4 meters. So it is quite, no, that's not right, 3 meters by 4 meters. So it's bigger than we originally meant it to be, but I'm so glad that we went for this size. It means it's not cramped and it's a really, really lovely place for lots of people to gather. And we added a perspex roof. It's not an absolute thing of beauty, but it means that we can use this at all times of year. And one of my favorite times is actually to sit under here when it is raining. And we've got this little rain chain here, and when it's raining, the roof makes the most gorgeous sound and the water running down is just gorgeous. This area was not that long ago a complete dumping ground. We just moved all of the rubble from the pergola renovation into this area here. But I knew that I wanted a dedicated space for our fire pits. So we cleared this area here, moved this planter into the corner. It was kind of there before. And now we have this lovely area where we can easily have a fire pit. That's what this is right here. And we can just take the lid off, light the fire, and all of us gather easily. Archie really wants that stick. I was thinking we might use this to decorate the arch outside, but I think Archie wants to have a quick chew of it first. So I shall hand it to him to do that. I don't know why he loves chewing pine cones. I've lost my train of thought. So yes, we gather here, light this fire, and it's just such a lovely thing to do. And I think sitting around the fire, it creates memories, doesn't it? And we tend to make things like stick bread, which we wrap. It's just kind of bread dough wrapped around a stick, and you just hold it into the fire. And if after you're done, you sprinkle it with a bit of cinnamon, it is absolutely delicious. There are, of course, many, many different ways, many different things you can do to prepare your garden for the winter. And there are just a couple of important things that I always do at this time of year. Now, I did say earlier that November is a great time in the garden because there isn't nearly as much to do, and that is true, but there are still 1 or 2 things to do, and one of them is dig up your dahlias. Now, of course, if you live in a very mild part of the country, you might be leaving your dahlias in the ground. I dig mine out. I am in Edinburgh in a south-facing garden, and recently our winters haven't been that cold, so you could say you could take the risk. I don't, because actually my winters tend to be very wet. And so while dahlias don't like to be very cold, they also don't like to be very wet. So I would dig out my dahlias. Now, the advice always is to wait until the frost has blackened them, which it certainly has. The hard frost we've had in the last week has definitely blackened my dahlia. Look at that. 2 weeks ago it was beautifully and blooming. It is clearly not flowering anymore. So I have dug it up. This is a dahlia called Night Silence. I absolutely love this dahlia. It was very, very beautiful. Now, all of this stuff can go into the compost. You don't need it. I'm just going to snip it off like this with my Felco secateurs. Love these guys. This I will chop up and either use it, just chuck it onto my borders to mulch it, or put it in the compost, but I won't do that just now because it's not that exciting. Now, there are many, many, many different ways to store your dahlias, and everybody will tell you a different way to do it. I am doing this for the first time this year, so we shall see how it goes. But I've got quite a few of these kind of wine crates that I don't need. And what I've done here is I've collected a whole load of leaves from my garden. My garden is absolutely covered in leaves, and I've just collected them in. So what I'm doing is, well, I probably don't need these sticks, I'll take those out. I've just covered the bottom of this box in lovely leaf mold. And now I'm going to take this dahlia, this night silence dahlia, and I'm just going to nestle it in there. Now, there will be those of you who are shocked because often the advice is to rinse off all of the dirt off your dahlias before you store them away, and maybe wrap them in newspaper or wrap them in cellophane, not cellophane, sawdust. But my theory, and I may well discover that I'm totally wrong come springtime, but my theory is that in their natural habitat in Mexico, they would get through the winters with soil on their roots. The only difference, really, and it can get very cold in Mexico, but what it doesn't do where they're from is it doesn't get very wet. So my theory is that if I store them like this, and I'll cut the other dahlias and I'll plonk them on here as well, the other night silence dahlias, I'll keep all the same ones together so that I know what's what. But my theory is that if they keep some soil on them, as long as I don't overwater them in the winter, which I won't do, I won't water them between now and springtime, they should be nice and dry and safe and happy. This is another night silence dahlia. I'm just doing the same thing, nestling it in here. Here we have another one. You can see they were nice and flowering not that long ago, but clearly not anymore. Look at these tubers. Come springtime, I'll be able to divide that and I'll get lots and lots of dahlias out of that one. You'll need to come back for that video. And here are my last couple night silence dahlias. You can see I've got quite a lot of them because I really, really like them. And yeah, we'll see come springtime how this method has worked. Hopefully it'll be a good one. Now, you might be like me and have lots and lots of leaves in your garden. Now, the kind of conventional wisdom is to pack it up into bags and then store it away for a year, and it'll turn into glorious leaf mulch, which it will, but that's too much work for me. I try to make my life as easy as possible. So one of the things I love to do is take my leaves and just literally chuck them on the border. Now, the great thing about leaves is that they will compost down themselves. You don't need to worry about them at all. You can just chuck them on your borders and you will be amazed. Whoops, there's a bit of random string that I found. You'll be amazed. Come springtime, these will have completely disappeared and will really have nourished your soil to make it a really, really fantastic enrichment for your soil. And the other great thing about it is that it's a really great environment for insects overwintering in your garden, which brings birds into your garden, and they will then hopefully come springtime munch up all of your slugs. So there are lots and lots of benefits to literally just taking leaves and chucking them into your borders. Apart from preparing the garden by making leaf mold and also prepping my dahlias, one of the things I love to do is string up lots of lights everywhere. I love the garden to be really, really sparkly and pretty. I really love that kind of magical element of this time of year, and especially because it gets dark so early, I find just by having some twinkly lights in the garden, it really invites you out into it. And the other thing I always do is make sure that I have really cozy blankets by the back door, so it's really easy just to grab them and to be really lovely and cozy in the garden. Now, one more gardening job, of course, for November is planting your bulbs. Now, we've just had our first hard frost, which is excellent because you should actually wait until after your first hard frost to plant your tulips. You do not want to plant them before that first hard frost because the frost kills the tulip fire spores. So you're much more likely to have success with your tulips if you wait until after that. Now, I have a really bad habit of not actually planting my bulbs until Boxing Day. For some reason, I always end up doing it on Boxing Day. But this year I shall endeavour to do it before. And when I do, I'll film kind of how I go about planting them and my thought process behind how I plant them. But first of all, I just wanted to show you some of the bulbs that I chose for my own garden this year. Now, this is a tulip I'm very excited about. It's called Silver Cloud. It is the gentlest, sweetest little tulip. I think she's going to be really, really lovely. Now, you'll notice that my colour scheme of my tulips, there's a lot of white and a lot of purple with a little bit of pink and a little bit of kind of deep burgundy mixed in. And my daffodils and my crocuses, they all kind of echo those colours. Now, those are the colours that I prefer for my garden anyway. I am not a huge fan of yellow. The only yellowy orange that I really have in my garden is a geum called Totally Tangerine. So I've really avoided yellow for my garden, but it's made it a little bit hard to find daffodils that flower early. Archie quite agrees. He really doesn't like yellow either. Archie, you okay? Anyway, so last year I tried a dahlia called Thalia, which was highly recommended and it was beautiful, but it didn't flower in my Edinburgh Scottish garden until May. And by May, I'm over daffodils. I don't need daffodils in my garden in May. So I got a couple of early flowering daffodils. Let me just try and find them. I found this one, a daffodil narcissus called Toto, which is supposed to flower from February to March. So hopefully that'll be lovely. And then I got another one, which is a little bit bigger, also in white, called Mount Hood. Again, is supposed to flower from February to March. So hopefully they will be really, really nice. Then the crocus, one of the main crocuses I got was called Jeanne d'Arc. Never know how to pronounce that properly, but that is a white one. I bought loads of those. I also got another one called Silver Coral, which hopefully will be really lovely. It's a little bit like the tulip, that Silver Cloud. It's very, very similar colour, so I'm hoping that'll look really, really nice together. Another tulip I got is called Katinka. It's very big and it's very purple, and it's going to be very much like a kind of spectacular one, quite an exciting one. Now, the thing about tulips is that sadly, they're probably not perennial. They just don't really like our Scottish or British conditions in the garden. Our soil tends to be very, very rich and they're just not used to it. If you look at the bulbs, they have so much energy within them because they're supposed to grow kind of in cracks between rocks in the mountains of Turkey. So they just find our soil very, very rich, which is why often they just don't come back. Whereas daffodils, narcissus, and crocuses and snowdrops, they all do. So you kind of have to buy your tulips bearing in mind that they might not come back in your garden. The only exception, and I'm excited to see what happens with this, is a tulip called White Emperor. Now, this one comes highly recommended by Sarah Raven. I love her podcast, and she talks about how this tulip, White Emperor, has been very perennial in her garden, which means that it comes back every year. Now, I don't know if it'll be perennial in my garden, but her tip was, she said she planted these around her apple trees. And the reason that worked really well is apple trees are very thirsty. So the soil around the apple trees is quite dry and quite nutrient poor because the apple trees kind of take all those nutrients. And the poorer soil conditions should help the tulips be more perennial. So my plan is to plant lots of these White Emperor tulips around my various trees, around my amelanchias, my apple trees, and even my roses, in the hope that, hi Archie, the kind of very hungry plants will create conditions that are better for the tulips. Let's see if that actually works. There are so many ways that we use the garden at this time of year. And you might think we're not using it as much because it's gotten quite cold. But actually, there are lots of different ways that we still use the garden. One of my favorite things to do is to come here in the morning. I sit in my egg chair, in this chair, and I journal. As I've already said, I think a lot about gratitude at this time of year. So one of the main things I journal about, hello Archie, is all the things that I'm grateful for. That's how I start every day. I come out here with a cup of tea, with my journal, and I write all about the things that I'm grateful for. One of them, of course, being this lovely dog, as well as the health of my children. Another way we use the garden a lot this time of year is for after school snacks in the garden. We use our table here in the pergola, and when the kids come home from school after I've collected them, we just have our snack out here. And I find that if we have our snack in the garden after school, it almost always leads to the kids having a play, having a run around, having a nice time together. It's so much more relaxed than if we've had it indoors. If we've had it indoors, we almost always get, when can we have screen time? When can we do this? When can we do that? But by having it in the garden, it just de-stresses everybody from the busy school day, all of the busyness, and it slows everybody down. We really connect. We maybe play a board game as well, and then the kids will often go off. They'll have a game of Tig in the garden. They'll go for an explore. They'll go for a cuddle. And just by having our after school snack in the garden, it just leads to them connecting and having a really nice time. Now, we've created this fire pit area, so of course we use that quite frequently in the winter. I love having fires when it's chilly out. I just think it adds so much atmosphere and so much loveliness. And another thing we've done recently is we've used the garden for the start of my daughter's birthday party. Now, it was a sleepover party, Friday to Saturday, and we had 9 of them. And we started the whole thing in the garden. Now, of course, they didn't sleep in the garden. That would have been crazy. But we started the party in the garden, and we had a kind of... Archie's excited. We had a little kind of treasury hunt. The kids played a game of Tig, which I hadn't organised. That just kind of happened. And we had hot chocolate and kind of the first part of the party in the garden. And again, it just brought them all together in such a lovely way. There was no fighting, there were no tears, they were just running around, giggling, and having a really lovely time. So even though it's chillier, and even though we obviously need to wrap up warm, I still think being in the garden in November is so, so lovely. So now we come to the garden walkthrough, an honest look at my garden. I'm always worried, always nervous about doing this because my garden is so far from perfect. But hopefully it shows you where I'm going with it, the projects that I'll be doing over the coming months and the kind of improvement of it, but also a kind of honest look, because I think none of our gardens are perfect. None of our gardens look exactly as we want them to. So here we go. Here we go, a walkthrough of my November garden. Now everything is looking a little bit sad, looking a bit sparse. I literally just pulled the the dahlia out of that pot. It's looking very, very sad. I'll need to do something else with it, and that little box is waiting to be planted up. My veg bed also looking very sad. The lemon balm is still going strong, and the strawberries are happy for next year, but my squash have not worked particularly well this year, and they're not overly happy. This bit there is going to be reworked. I'm going to add a bit more of the path. The plum tree and my raised bed all looking a little bit sad, a little bit pathetic, but such is the way of the November garden. This is relatively new here. I'll need to figure out exactly what I'm planting in it. Again, not looking spectacular, and this is my corner of doom, my corner of mess. Really need to do something with that, but there we are. This is our little seating area. It's been mostly used as a stage by the kids, which has been really sweet. Oh, the garden, just in general, looking a little bit worse for wear, but there are signs that life is happening. Look at this Viburnum tinus. You can see the blossoms are working their way to the surface. So some nice things will be happening soon. This is my daughter's climbing tree, her favourite place to play, and I recently made her another little play area underneath a little mini planter which has some crocuses planted underneath, as well as some moss and some stones for all of her animals. And I added all of these little stones, I say little stones, they're quite big, around here as well for her to play with. And again, this tree, which is her favourite place to climb. Now, onto the pond. My main task there is to pick all the leaves out of it. And here is my arch. Now, the main plant you can see growing on there is a plant called Cobea scandens. Now, if you were with me in January, you'll know that I planted it from seed, and look how far it grew. It covered one whole side of the arch, but I think now the frost might have killed it. So that might be the end of it. But if you are looking for a plant that does an incredible amount of growing in one season, this is a fantastic plant. Really, really great. This is my pile of twigs. I'm hoping it'll be good for some creatures to overwinter under. We shall see. I have recently made these giant stars. I'm not sure if I love them or if they're utterly ridiculous. The tall one is bigger than I am, but anyway, there we are. This is our little fire pit area, one of our new projects. This I absolutely adore. I love sitting under here. And then the big project that we had this year, the pergola, definitely the best thing we've done in the garden by far. We use it all the time, and it is gorgeous whether it's sunny and it provides us shade, or in the rain, or even, as we recently had, in the snow. It is absolutely fantastic, and the egg chair is probably my favourite place to sit, at least for the latter half of the year. At the start of the year, my favourite place to sit is probably the pond viewing platform. These are the raised planters on the edge of the pergola. I definitely need to work on the planting in those. You can see the dahlias that are in there have been blackened, but generally I wasn't that happy with it. And this border here needs quite a lot of work done to it as well. I don't know if you remember from earlier in the video, I was talking about the hydrangea Annabelle that I propagated. I'm hoping to put some of those into this border here when it is ready. Oh, the little robin was just here, but I don't think I can capture him on this camera. He's hopping over there. I don't think I can capture him. Anyway, generally these borders here were okay, but I didn't love them, so I need to do some more work on them this coming year, 2025. I've got big plans for the garden. I can't wait to share them with you. Now, here is our pond. Sitting here and watching the creatures in the pond was my favourite place to sit from about March until June, because the pond was so busy with tadpoles and then baby frogs. It was absolutely adorable, and the newts were busy in it as well. But hopefully all of those frogs and newts will now be cozy in the little log pile that my son made for them a long time ago. I think we made this log pile back in February, and I know it was busy with baby frogs during the summer as well, but I hope that they'll all be nice and cozy and getting to overwinter in there now. So, continuing our walk through the garden, it's all looking a little bit sad, isn't it? This is the border that was so lush and so abundant in spring and summer, and now there's still some dahlias in there that I need to pick out, but also just some general thinking I need to do about what exactly I want growing in here. Some of it was fantastic, some of it I loved, some of it just didn't really work out the way that I had hoped. Similarly, with this border here, I've already done a bit of moving around, trying to create a bit more continuity. I've planted a couple of Desdemona roses in this border, but you can see still some dahlias to pull out, and just a bit more thinking to be done about what exactly would look lovely in there. The Verbena bonariensis, though, has been absolutely spectacular. I love it. And you can see it still even has some tiny flowers on it now. It's such a fantastic plant. And then we are back to this border here. Another fantastic plant is this Erysimum poem lavender. It really hasn't stopped flowering since we bought it. Planted it in March. So in terms of flower power, it's just been incredible, and it is evergreen. So it'll be lovely for most of the year. Our grass is an absolute mess, total shambles. I can't seem to keep up with raking up all the leaves, and it's absolutely destroying the grass. But Archie, you don't mind, do you, Archie? And just to complete our walk through the garden, this is the little border that I created in March. I'm generally quite happy with it, just a little bit of editing to be done. November there reminds us that beauty can be found in quiet moments. Frost-touched mornings, a robin landing on a nearby branch, the simple act of being together. Our garden is more than a space. It's where we create memories, foster tradition, and find peace amongst the chaos of the coming Christmas season.